Tommy Jaggi of Fansided here with NFL analyst Marcus Mosher on our first ever episode of the No Huddle Show on Stacking the Box. NFL draft is coming right up here, Marcus, and I want to talk about some of the things happening around the league right now. We're going to talk about the quarterback position because it's so big for so many teams. Have a chance to reshape the future right now. And the biggest news coming out just yesterday, Jalen Milroe had an invite to the NFL draft. And so I want to ask you about that because normally this only happens to players who are guaranteed to go in the first round, right?
Yeah, I mean, last year we had every single player that was invited to the combine went in the first round. So, I mean, as you would expect, you see that tweet from Dane Brugler, who first reported that news.
Mm-hmm.
Some shock, right? Because Jalen Milroe, let me ask you this, Tommy. Do you see Jalen Milroe as not only a first round quarterback, because he's probably going in the first round, but do you see him worthy of a guy that should be picked, let's say, inside the top 35, top 40 picks?
I don't think he's that guy. Even like we've watched a lot of this film already, and he just doesn't have. There's too many boxes he doesn't check. Right? He does. I mean, we can start with even like the size metrics comes in under 6'2". I know that's okay these days for quarterback, but he's 6'1" and 7/8, 217 pounds. That's fine. 8 and 5/8 inch hands. And
they got bigger. Hold on. They got bigger at the combine.
Yeah.
They got to like 9 3/4.
I liked what Daniel Jeremiah had to say about that. And he's joking like, all right, yeah, his hands didn't grow an inch since last time, but he learned how to stretch his thumb and his pinky. That's for sure. So we're already looking at a couple outlierish traits. And then when you combine that with the fact that he's far away as a passer, like he's just not there yet at all. And I think that he's getting drafted based on his athleticism. Let's be real. Like if he goes that early in the draft, it's because he ran a 4.4 and he looks good doing that. But I just think that he's just doesn't come close to checking those boxes that you want him to check as a first round quarterback at all. And that's why I think that honestly, to me, he's probably somewhere in between Justin Fields and like Malik Willis as a prospect, like somewhere in between those two guys there.
But quarterbacks go early, right? Like it's what we've become used to seeing. We saw 5 quarterbacks go inside the top 12 last year. At this same time, 2 weeks before the draft, we thought, hey, Michael Penix, that maybe that's a second round pick. Bo Nix, maybe he's available at pick 40, pick 45. And yet those guys both went inside the top 12. So just to be clear, I think Penix and Bo Nix and McCarthy are better prospects. But in a class that only has, in my mind, one franchise quarterback, it's not hard to squint and see a world where which Jalen Milroe is the second or third quarterback off the board. Right now, Tommy, on the consensus board, he's 68th overall. So that seems like a stretch to go from the 68th player to being, let's say, the 21st player in the draft. I don't know. I just picked that spot randomly, which so happens to be where your Steelers pick. But at this point, I would almost be shocked if Jalen Milroe isn't a first-round pick because teams need quarterbacks. There's only a limited amount in this class. And when you've got somebody that is this athletic, it has this strong of an arm, they go early.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about the visits again. It's like 10 guys getting invited this year, 13 guys last year. And I think, where did Darius Robinson go last year?
27.
He was the one that I was looking at in that list. So yeah, he was still in the first round. They got like 100% hit rate is what we were talking about. And so he's going to go there somewhere, it seems like, especially if they're downsizing the amount of players coming to the draft. Now, I can get behind Milroe as even the third best quarterback in this class. Like, I think the top two pretty consensusly are Cam and Shedeur. I know a lot of people would say Dart is that third one. Some people would even say Tyler Shuck. I think you can make the case that Milroe is the next of that group if you want to just take a polarizing prospect based on the traits there. But a first-round pick, I mean, we're talking about a guy who is not close to that finished product coming out. I know a lot of people compare him to like Anthony Richardson coming out of school. Had a really small sample size, but Richardson was like significantly bigger as well as a guy that can actually stand in the pocket and do some of that stuff too. I just don't know what to make of Milroe because when you look at him, he's almost got like a running back type build and he's not a good passer at this point. So I think where he should go and where he's going to go are two very different stories there. But if he does slide out of the first round, Marcus, I think if the Giants or the Browns don't take a quarterback in round 1, and you want to get one right there because you just nabbed an elite player with Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, like something like that makes way more sense to me. But taking him like pick 21 for the Steelers, I mean, I can't imagine like the Saints would go that
No,
early, like
no,
pick 9 with
we're looking at like in the
no.
20s or 30s and likely a trade up. But I wanted to talk about
Mhm,
like if this is going to work, what does it look like? Because I don't think you and I are in agreement. Like this isn't a first round quarterback, but I'm not ruling out the possibility that it could work. One of the reasons why is I think this just might be like the best running quarterback prospect maybe we've ever
mhm,
seen. As much as I love Lamar as a runner, he's just a lot faster
mhm.
and he's more well built than what Lamar was. And you see it on tape. Like you watch that game against LSU where he had 185 rushing yards. Like he is a dynamic running run. I don't want to say running back. He's a dynamic runner. I almost said running back.
That's all right.
Although we talked about this before. If he was a running back prospect
Mhm.
only, he probably still gets drafted, like probably day 3,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he's got an incredible arm. He is a fantastic runner. And then everybody at Alabama just raves about his character. So you start checking those boxes. I do
Mhm,
wonder if a team, let's like use the Browns, right? Let's say the Browns draft Shedeur, or sorry, they draft Travis Hunter at number 2, and you're in a Kevin Stefanski offense, which is a lot of one reads or high low reads. And if it's not there, you take off. I can see a world where Jalen Milroe
mhm.
ends up becoming maybe the best quarterback in this class.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it does come down to a scheme fit thing. Are you going to get him with a coach and with a scheme that is best for his skill set? Because he's got, like you said, a very particular one. He is an elite rushing quarterback. There's no doubt about that. And that pops on film for sure when you see it. And I think that there's a chance for him to be a transcendent player in that regard, but it's everything else that comes with the position, right? If you're not running a one read offense, if you have to go through progressions, and we just know just from watching Milroe right now, these past 2 years here, just the general accuracy from the pocket. I mean, he can make it generally accurate. He's not going to be a pinpoint accurate passer. And I hate to bring it back to this too, Marcus, but you look at that hand size and call it what it is. You can see those hands are not big on film. You go any still shot of Jalen Milroe, whatever, any video of him, you can see we had this conversation so many times in 2022 with with Kenny Pickett. Obviously, vastly different skill sets there. One is an elite runner and has a much better arm. There's no denying
Yep.
that Milroe does, but it makes you wonder, like if he gets to a team where he's playing cold weather football, you're trying to throw a frozen football in January. Are you going to be able to handle that when you've got sub 9-inch hands? Like those are the things that I would still put into question on top of everything else. But I do agree with you though. A team like the Browns, if you are getting in a situation like that, make it simple starting off. And again, quarterbacks can improve, right? He can go into year 2, year 3. We could be talking about a different Jalen Milroe here. I mean, Alabama does have a pretty good track record with their quarterbacks, and guys that are all different kinds. I mean, not really Mac Jones, but the other two that have come through there recently have been good football players. And so Milroe, the most
Mhm.
talented of the group physically, it's just what can you get out of him as a passer? Because so much of the game is mental and so much of the game comes down to accuracy.
You talked about the hand size. I actually am more concerned about the fumbles. I think he had 24 fumbles over the last 2 years.
Which could be
Well, it
related to the
probably
hand
is,
size.
right? Now,
Yeah.
a lot of that is just because he's handling such a big workload on the ground, but still, that's
Mhm.
24 fumbles in 2 years. That's way too many.
It's a
Right.
lot of fumbles, and if you're gonna run him as much
You
as you're
can't do
planning on
no,
running him, like, you
no,
don't want to be
you
that
can't.
careless with the
I
football.
do think I do think there's going to be a team that talks himself into Jalen Milroe in round 1, whether that's a trade up to try to get like the 5th-year option, maybe the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders. They see it like, "Hey, let's get him here
Mhm,
in the first round. Let's get that 5th-year option. We don't necessarily have to start him right away." Um, but I do think that is valuable. The other part of
yeah,
this is you mentioned Jalen Hurts. We saw Jalen Hurts be very inaccurate during his time at Alabama. He goes to a more wide open offense uh, at Oklahoma, and
mhm,
we see him be a much better quarterback, a much better passer. Goes in round 2, struggled with his accuracy in a big way earlier in his career, but kind of started to progress as he's gotten older and he's gotten more weapons around him.
mhm.
I wonder if Jalen Hurts' success, especially now that they won the Super Bowl, will have teams more inclined to take a shot on Milroe because he's so athletic And the size, honestly, Tommy, doesn't worry me that much because
Mm.
he's 6'2", 217. How many quarterbacks in the league right now are 6'2" and under? It's gotta be at least 12 starting quarterbacks in the league.
There's a dilemma going on, and I think that that's the threshold, right? 6'2" for me is the threshold. We've talked about this before. Once you get under that mark, and maybe Bryce Young will be an exception.
Well,
Maybe
we've
there'll.
got
I mean,
Caleb
we've
Williams
seen
and
Baker
Baker
Mayfield turn things around.
Mayfield and
Yeah,
Tua.
and
There's a
yes,
lot of quarterbacks
yes.
under 6'2".
Quarterbacks that are coming out, they're generally smaller than they once were. Now, ideally, would I like to have the 6'4" quarterback from the pocket? Yeah, I think that you don't have an issue. You're right. You can see over the offensive line. That's not going to be a problem. And so I agree with that. He checks that box. And so, or at least close enough to it. That 6'2" mark came in just under that. That's fine with me. It's the hand size I'm more concerned about, the fumbles that you mentioned, and just the sporadic accuracy, like the game to game, like careless decision making, which again, some of these things can improve. We've seen quarterbacks do that before, but that's kind of where my thought
Well,
process is with that.
I agree. The accuracy generally
Mm,
isn't good. Full stop. But I do think as a deep passer, I think he's pretty accurate. And this
yeah.
is where I would push back on like Jackson Dart being a more accurate quarterback because I don't see that. When you look at Jackson Dart on his targets down the field, I think he is awful as a deep ball passer. I think where Milroe is better is on some of those vertical shots. He struggles more on the intermediate throws. And that's an issue, but maybe you could design an offense like what Kevin Stefanski has done in the past, where, hey, it's a lot of
Mhm.
short underneath stuff, and then it's the go balls down the sideline. If I were a team
Yeah.
drafting, let's say it's the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, and I need a quarterback, I would much rather gamble on Milroe's freakish talent than just take someone like Jackson Dart, who, yeah, he maybe checks every box, but there's nothing special about him. And you feel like you're going to be stuck in that quarterback limbo of having the 21st best quarterback in the
Mhm.
league. Whereas Milroe, you're going to find out pretty quickly what you have. And I just think that's a better decision if you're a front office.
Yeah, and I think the general philosophy is spot on there. Like, I didn't have an issue with what the Colts did when they drafted.
Anthony
Why am I drawing
Richardson.
a blank
Yeah.
right now? Anthony Richardson, even like what the Titans did when they drafted Will Levis. Like, if you were going after that type of quarterback, you're going to know. And I think, unfortunately, both of those teams know they probably don't have their guy at this point. But you're right. Like, it's worse to get stuck in like a Daniel Jones situation that the Giants were in if that's what Jackson Dart ends up being. The Bring it back to Milroe though one more time here. Like, if you don't have an intermediate game though, and if it never develops much more from where it is right now, I think that is where it becomes so concerning.
But
So
that's
if you can
Jalen
get that
Hurts, though.
down, I think
Jalen
there's a lot to
Hurts
work
doesn't
with.
throw over the middle of the field
It's
at
true.
all.
Yeah. I mean, but when you live and die by the deep ball, then what we saw with Russell Wilson just this past season. I know that. I mean, so it's you can create splash plays that way. It just doesn't make for a very
It
consistent
it
offense.
doesn't, but
But
if you have the deep accuracy and you have the rushing ability, that's where you can
mhm,
really design.
yeah,
Again, you're drafting this guy in the 20s or 30s. You're not spending the
yeah.
number 1 or number 2 pick on
Mhm,
him. You understand there might be some limitations. But man, if you're a team like Cleveland and you decide to pass on a quarterback, I would, if it cost me an extra
mhm.
third round pick to go up and get Jalen Milroe rather than starting Kenny Pickett, or for the Giants to go get Jalen Milroe rather than starting Russell Wilson, I do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I get it. I get the talent gap between the two, and I think it's a good philosophy overall. And so, if you strike out swinging for the fences, I don't have an issue with that. Let's shift it over to Shedeur Sanders, and let's just talk about, like, he's kind of all over the map here, right? I think what is his latest over under, like nine
Yeah,
and a half? Like, the Saints feel like would be a pretty solid landing spot overall. They just got their new head coach over there in Kellen Moore, and so how would you feel about Sanders going there? And then, like, what's the overall scope for Sanders? Like, what is the range for him in this
I think
draft?
the Saints make a lot of sense, right? You're playing in a dome. You play in a
Mhm,
division that generally has good weather. Obviously, the Falcons have a dome as well. And I think a Kellen Moore offense would suit him well. I think Shador does a good job of throwing the ball down the field. I think he's got good anticipation and good accuracy. But all of the reports coming out today are the Saints don't really love him. Nick Underhill, who is one of the better
mhm.
Saints beat reporters, said that the Saints just aren't all that interested in Shador Sanders. And if he's on the board when they are on the clock, they're likely going to pass on him in favor of a positional player like Ashton Denty or Matthew Golden.
Mm.
which leads us to how far could Shedeur fall in this draft? It's not all that uncommon to see quarterbacks who have been rated really high fall in the draft, whether that was Aaron Rodgers back in 2005, Geno Smith in 2013. Like, we see these type of quarterbacks, the ones that don't have elite traits, fall. I'm starting to think, Tommy,
Mm.
that we could see a pretty massive fall for Shedeur Sanders on draft night.
Yeah, I've kind of been thinking that way as well. And the slide could be real. I mean, based on the teams that are picking after the Saints there, like these teams have already drafted their
Let's go
quarterback,
through it.
or somebody's going to have to move
Let's
up.
go through the
Yeah,
team.
yeah, I
So,
got to read.
assuming he gets past that stretch of the Raiders, Jets, and Saints, which I think he will, you've got the Bears
Mm,
at 10, no. You've got the 49ers at 11, no. You've got the
yep,
Cowboys at 12, no.
yep.
Miami at 13 is a little bit of a wild card just because of Tua's health, but my
Mm.
guess is still that's a no. The Colts at 14, no. Falcons, no. Cardinals, no. Bengals, no. Seattle at 18 is interesting. They did just pay Sam Darnold, but I don't think that's really a
They've got an outs after this year,
yes.
right? Like
Yep.
they could, if it doesn't
Yep.
work
So
out.
that's a
So
potential landing spot.
that's one
Yep.
potential team is all right there.
Tampa Bay at 19, no. Denver at 20, no. Pittsburgh at 21, yes. But listen to these next teams: Chargers, Packers,
Mm.
Vikings, Texans, Rams, Ravens, Lions, Commanders, Bills, Chiefs, Eagles. There's only like
So you're talking about
two
like,
landing spots there, right?
yeah, it really seems that way. If the Dolphins aren't willing to do it, if the Steelers don't like move up a few spots or they don't take him, maybe it's somebody jumping from the second round back into the first to take Sanders there. What's interesting too, obviously, I follow the Steelers closely. They were hosting Jackson Dart for a visit as Shedeur was performing at the Colorado Showcase. And so they did not have their brass on hand. That's usually a pretty good indicator that they're not that interested. If he doesn't get that pre-draft visit by the Steelers, you can pretty much, based on history, mark him off as a potential candidate there. And so the slide would continue.
And I don't know if Shador is a great fit in Pittsburgh. We got a comment from our guy Shane that says here that Shador reminds him of Teddy Bridgewater. That's actually who I have as my comp, and I was a big Teddy Bridgewater
That's a
fan,
good comp.
especially before all of the
Mhm.
injuries. Teddy's a good
Yeah.
quarterback. He's accurate. He's athletic, but not athletic enough to be a runner. Athletic enough to get outside the pocket. But I look at a team like the Steelers, where you're going to be playing in bad weather every single week. I don't know if
Mhm.
he's got the arm strength to kind of cut through that wind in Cincinnati, in Cleveland, in Buffalo, in some of those other cold weather cities. I can see how someone like Jalen Milroe, who I don't think Pittsburgh's going to draft, but Milroe would be more appealing to them than someone like Shedeur
Mhm.
Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree for the reasons that you just mentioned. Like, it's Steelers want to run a ground and pound game, which just makes it all the more odd if they were to go that route, considering they had Justin Fields at 25 years old. Last year, they benched him after week 6 when he had 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. Is what it is. I mean, Fields probably wasn't going to turn out to be a franchise quarterback, but you're going now and drafting like the great value brand version of that player. In my opinion, like as a prospect, he just doesn't come close to where Fields was. And I was probably a little too high on Fields coming out of Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a chance they like that type of prospect better. And it's worth noting that the Steelers had a dinner meeting with Jalen Milroe, making him a surefire candidate in a potential. I like him obviously a lot more situation for
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, but not sitting there right at 21 based on my evaluation of him. But yeah, Shedeur, like, it does worry me when you draft a quarterback who just has like baseline traits, baseline arm talent, especially playing in the AFC North. And we saw what the weather was like this past winter up here in the North. And so that would worry me a little bit if you don't have the traits to do that. And I think of the playoff game 2 years ago and just the stark difference between Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa when you get into cold weather situations. Now that might be a little unfair because Miami is used to playing in such warm weather, but you get into the playoffs, and if you don't have that arm that can cut through the wind and snow and ice and rain and whatnot else, other the elements up there, it could be an issue. And so I do worry that Sanders would be one of those guys who kind of gets stuck like as a mid-level starting quarterback, but not much higher.
I like that you used past tense for winter up here. Like, it didn't just snow this morning.
It's literally there's snow on the ground right now. Yes.
Yeah. Here's my prediction with Shedeur. I think whoever drafts him is going to get him via trade. And I've become more open to the idea of the Giants who sit at pick number 3 right now,
Mm,
assuming it's Cam Ward at 1 and Travis Hunter to the Browns at 2. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Giants trade back. And I know Abdul Carter's an unbelievable prospect, but
mm,
they just signed Brian Burns to a massive contract last year. They traded a second round pick for him. They spent the number 5 overall pick on Kayvon Thibodeau in the 2022 class, I believe. And then they paid big
mm.
money to Chauncey Golston this offseason. So they've already invested in 3 edge rushers. I wouldn't be surprised if they move back from like 3 to 8 to 9, and that's where they take Shedeur Sanders somewhere where it's a little bit more palatable. Or if you see a team like the Browns or Giants at the top of round 2, move up into the 20s to get him. But I just have a hard time seeing the current slotting, him landing anywhere inside the top 20.
And that's what's so hard about really any of these teams that need a quarterback this year is knowing that, especially if it's the Browns or Giants, we're talking early in the draft, knowing that you are passing on an elite or a potential generational prospect to take a I know we do our grades differently. I've got a 1-2 grade on Shedeur Sanders and on Cam Ward. And I think that is, I mean, it's a reach in terms of what it is, where you're picking, but obviously the value of the quarterback position, it's hard to win without one. So I understand the thought process there, but I agree. Like if there's a world in which you can trade back, if like you're the Giants and grab your quarterback that you want and then pick up an extra more draft capital in the process, that's wonderful.
I think that'll
But
happen.
the problem is the fact that we're having the conversation. Yeah, and it might. But the problem is if you are willing to trade back from a franchise quarterback, how much confidence do you have in him? And that I think it comes back to that philosophy issue. It's like some teams you should probably only take quarterbacks if you really think that like this is going to be a player who just paves the way for us and is here for a
I
decade.
also think Shador is a little bit of an interesting case because of who his father is, and they've been trying to orchestrate that he gets
Mm,
into a good situation this whole time. So if you're the Giants, I don't think you're all that worried. Obviously, New England and Jacksonville aren't taking him. It doesn't sound like the Raiders or the Jets are all that interested. So if you move back from 3 to 7, nobody's going to scoop up Shador during that stretch. And if you can add a second round pick or a
yeah.
2026 first round pick, I think you do that in a heartbeat. And I think you're going to have those offers on the table because there is a big talent gap between Abdul Carter and the next best player on the board. That's why I do think
Mhm.
ultimately we're going to see him involved in some kind of trade. I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland tries to get back up and reunite Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders together, but I just don't envision Shador being drafted by any team that's currently sitting at their draft spot.
Yeah, no, I mean, we looked at that stretch and I mean, it's a pretty dry spout there in terms of quarterback needy teams. So yeah, I agree completely. I got a question up here. Let's see. I know they won't do it, but the 49ers talking Shador and choosing not to pay Purdy may not be the worst idea, especially with the exodus of talent. Yeah, if my brother is watching the show, he's gonna be very upset right now. He's a big Brock Purdy apologist, but I get it, Shane, 100%. Like I am with you on this line of thinking because Purdy's going to get paid out the wazoo. And I'm more of a believer in Shanahan than I am in the actual Brock Purdy as a player. And I think everything's been phenomenal so far. But I do think that 49er scheme is somewhere you can replicate a lot of that production. We saw it with Garoppolo. Obviously, Purdy's better than that, still falling short, though. And so, yeah, I would be very tempted and almost inclined to do that if I was San Francisco.
It's fun to talk about, but it's not happening because for a couple of reasons.
No,
The
it's not going to
49ers are
happen.
in a win
It's not
now
going to
window.
happen.
I think they're, to be honest, I think they're one of the
Mm,
teams that I could see moving up from 11 to 3 to go try to get Abdul Carter because they've got an older roster already. George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams. They need to win right now. So I
mm,
understand the point, and I wouldn't be surprised, Shane, if there is a team out there like the 49ers that end up taking Shedeur Sanders. I don't think anybody was anticipating the Falcons taking Michael Penix at 8
mhm.
last year after they just paid Kirk Cousins. But I think teams are more open to that idea than ever before. So maybe we do get a surprise team on draft night for Shedeur.
Yeah, and I think that would be brilliant by San Francisco. I really do. I think that Sanders would be awesome in that offense. Now, whether or not they would hand the reins over to him before that contract
No
comes
chance.
in, I have my doubts for sure. But you can't, if Sanders proves to be a good quarterback and you pay Purdy, you can't have too much quarterback talent on your roster. And the 49ers found this out in the playoffs just, what was it, 2 years ago, where they had the most talented roster in the league, debatably. And they did not have the quarterback play down the stretch because of injuries. And so that definitely plays a factor as well. Let's talk about some of the other potential first-round quarterbacks here. We named a few. We'll go back up to Cam Ward first, and then we'll maybe talk about Jackson Dart. But Cam, I mean, we're looking at the Giants and the Titans, right? Like, there's no other third option here.
I mean, I think there's only one option. I think it's the Titans. I think the fact that the Titans have
There's no chance. So I just want to be clear. There's no chance that the Giants are
no,
going to trade up to pick
no,
one at this
because I
point.
don't think the Titans
Okay,
want to
that's
trade
dead.
back. I think the Titans are dead set on Cam Ward. They've canceled
Okay.
all of their other visits with the top players in this draft because they know, and I don't blame them. I think Cam
Mhm.
Ward is absolutely worthy of the number one overall pick. He's got a lot of traits that actually remind me of Dak Prescott coming out. He's a big body. He's kind of compact. I think Cam Ward. He's not in the tier of Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels last year, but I think he's at least a tier higher than the next group, which is Penix, McCarthy, and Bo Nix. And in a draft in a year where they absolutely need a quarterback, I think Cam Ward's an easy pick at number one.
Mm. Well, based on my grading scales that I've been doing since 2015 now, I would have had him in the same tier as McCarthy last year, but a tick lower than that. But I agree, I would have had him above Penix. I would have had him above Nix. There's enough to get excited about in terms of the arm strength, the scrambling ability, all that kind of stuff. You can see throwing from different arm angles. It's just that we always talk about like Jackson Dart coming from this one read offense. Like I don't think it's fair to mention it for Dart and not mention it for Cam Ward, because Ward does a lot of that too, where it's some of the wide hashes stuff, your one read and go slant or post over the middle of the field. Like I do think there's obviously more talent to work with there, and that's why he's going to be the top quarterback taken in the class. But if I do compare him to last year's class, he would have been my QB5. And last year was a kind of an exception, a really good quarterback class. So it's all relative. Like 2022, he would have easily been my number one quarterback in that class. But I don't know, like, if this is like just into the podium type of thing. Like, I would wait this out. I would milk the clock a little bit. If somebody offers you a king ransom, I mean, this, no offense to Titans fans, but Tennessee is going to suck this year, whether Cam Ward is on the roster or not. And so I would be just as inclined to kind of look towards the future too. Like, you don't want to lock yourselves into something that's not going to be good enough, but maybe maybe surprises us and has a Jaden Daniels like rookie season. And so we've seen stranger things happen. I'm not as big of a Cam Ward fan as you are, but I understand, like, when you don't have a quarterback, you've got to do something. The Will Levis experiment has been atrocious, and so it's just not working out for him.
I think the thing I like the most about Cam Ward is he's been successful anywhere he's gone in any scheme that he's played in. Started at Incarnate Word and was dominant there. Went to Washington State,
Yep.
made them a contender. He goes to this Miami team that was absolutely atrocious for years and instantly makes them a college football contender or college football playoff contender. It's not his fault. The defense was as bad as we've ever seen, but he is somebody that can transform a team. And man, I know he takes too many sacks and I know he can be too aggressive, but he just makes so many plays with his arm and his legs. His arm, he's got a fantastic arm.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a really good release. To me, he's the type of player you take, especially in that division, because I don't think the Texans, the Jags are teams to be overly concerned about. The Colts aren't either. You get a competent quarterback
Yeah.
that can make plays with his arms and legs, and all of a sudden you could win that division. That AFC South is not great. We saw how much a competent quarterback helped with the Texans. I think Cam Ward could do something similar with the Titans. So for me, it's an easy pick. We'll see what they do in the rest of the draft and what they do in future years coming up. But I have no problem with that pick at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm fine with taking that stab too. It all comes down to, like, what is your philosophy? Like, how long am I going to give my quarterback if things go awry? Like, and to me, the answer is like kind of like the 2-year mark. Like, if it lasts any longer than that, I'm now looking back into the draft again and say, all right, what I had wasn't good enough. I will need to move forward and try to make it better. So if they're willing to turn the page after a couple of years, by all means, take that swing on a quarterback. You're going to do it on one with tools and not Jalen Milroe tools, because we're talking about a much safer prospect than that in Cam Ward still. So I get it. And that's what it's going to end up being, I'm sure. Let's talk about Jackson Dart here, because this is a guy with just such varying opinions. And obviously, since the end of the college football season until now, he has skyrocketed into the first round. We're seeing him at pick 9 to the Saints. We're seeing him in the first round. We're seeing him to the Steelers a lot at pick 21. And the Steelers did have a pre-draft visit with Jackson Dart, like we said, as Shedeur's Colorado showcase was going on. And so, Marcus, do NFL teams like Jackson Dart better than Shedeur? Like, would we go that far?
No, I don't think they do. I think there are a couple teams that are intrigued by Jackson Dart, but no, I don't think there's any scenario in which Dart goes ahead of Shedeur. Dart is one of the players I really struggle with, because there's just not a lot on his tape that translates to the NFL. And then the tools they're fine, but they're not special. And I wouldn't even say they're above average. They're just very average, right? I think he's a good athlete. He's not a great athlete. I think his arm is NFL caliber, but it's not a weapon. You rarely see him having to throw the ball into tight windows. His pressure to sack rate was one of the worst in college football last year. He takes way too many unnecessary sacks. And then we talked about his deep accuracy. I think his deep accuracy is one of the worst in this class. I get that he checks a lot of boxes, but he reminds me of Mitchell Trubisky in the same way, where Trubisky checked a lot of these physical tools boxes. He is athletic, but when you turn on the games and you watch him, it just leaves a lot to be desired. So if you're a team that needs a quarterback like the Steelers or the Browns or the Giants in round 2, I would be very cautious about making this pick.
Yeah, Marcus, I wrote back like during the Senior Bowl week that Jackson Dart is a box checker. There's no doubt about it when it comes to 6'2 plus, 220 plus, you could say 225 plus if you wanted to. 3 years of SEC production. He's 21 years old. He's one of the youngest notable quarterbacks in this entire draft class. He does check a lot of those boxes. He's got the moxie that you look for at the position. I think he makes that very clear. And so all these things he does check. The problem is, like you said, he doesn't really exceed in a lot of these boxes. I mean, he comes in just where you want him to and not a lot else. And the biggest area is in terms of this overall arm talent. Like, I think I see just a very average NFL arm. And so that would worry me. Like, what does the upside look like at the next level? And we obviously, you can't ignore the Lane Kiffin offense. It's like quarterbacks been failing coming from that. We saw Matt Corral, and then obviously there's a slate of other things going on with Corral, but it's you go from coming from a one read offense in college to suddenly you've got NFL pass rushers coming after you. You've got to be able to read a defense. Like, it is a concern for sure. I do think that Dart, wherever he goes, is a guy who would benefit from having a redshirt year in the NFL and then trying to start in 2026. He's young enough where he can do it that way, but is the gamble worth the skills package that you're getting? And I think, to me, he's like the prototype day 2 quarterback. Like, this is the guy that you would take on day 2, like 10 times out of 10, just to say, at the very worst, he's going to be a high level backup. At the best, maybe he could be Brock Purdy. Maybe he could be somebody from that line of quarterbacks, a guy who doesn't necessarily have great overall traits, but just ends up being a good football player with the collection of things he has going on for him. So that's kind of my overall thoughts on Purdy, but I do think at the end of the day, he's going to go higher than where I would feel comfortable drafting him.
Yeah, he's one of those ones. I think if your team drafts him, you're kind of gritting your teeth a little bit, hoping that there's a really good plan. But he was one of the worst quarterbacks in college football last year on second and third read throws. So you better have a lot of faith in your head coach or your offensive coordinator to get the most out of him. And then a lot of these times, these teams that need quarterbacks, Steelers, Giants, Browns, not so much the Browns, because we know they have a good coach there, but I would be very cautious about that pick. That's how I'll say.
Yeah, and I will say, as a Steelers fan, like, I don't want any part of that at pick 21. Like, if you're able to trade back, late into the first round, or heck, go back into the second round, pick up day two draft capital. Then if I bust on the pick, it's not that big of a deal. The Steelers have to draft a quarterback anyway. But that's I'm with you there on Dart. Like that one's hard for me to get behind overall. Is there anybody else that can sneak into this first round that we haven't talked about? Like somebody just throws us through a loop like a Tyler Shuck.
No, I think we covered it. I mean, I think Tyler Shuck is
I think so.
Tyler Shuck is a fun quarterback to talk about. I like his tape a lot, but you're talking about somebody who had 3 straight season-ending injuries, who's going to be 26 during his rookie year. That doesn't concern me as much as the injuries. He just can't stay healthy, and generally those players fall quite a bit.
Yeah, too many red flags there for me in terms of the injury history, the age. We just haven't seen many guys like him. I do like the size. I like the athletic profile. I like the arm talent. But if he doesn't come in with guns ablazing right away, like how long can you give this guy to wait anything? I think that his most likely trajectory is just an NFL career backup. And I think that he does go on day 2. Would you say that he goes like, make a prediction like in the 30s somewhere, like early?
No,
I
think he goes in like the 60s or 70s. Some team drafts him to be like a high level
Okay.
backup with maybe an older quarterback, right? But I I don't see any world in which he's drafted inside the top 50 and somebody's projecting him to be a starter, because you can't rely on him to stay healthy. And that's just one
Yeah.
of the main things with quarterback. Your reliability is the most important thing, and he hasn't been that at all.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about Matthew Golden before we sign off here for today. The only wide receiver invited to the 2025 NFL draft in Green Bay. What do you make of that? Because I know we started watching film back in December, January. I mean, it was all Ted McMillan. It was all Luther Burden. And now suddenly Matthew Golden is making this miraculous rise. Obviously, it helps when you run a 4.29 at the NFL Combine. I don't know how much that factors into the valuation process, but we look at this where it stands today and knowing that he's that receiver that was invited to the draft. Is he the first receiver that's going to be taken on draft day?
My guess is no, but I think he's definitely the most likely to be the second receiver drafted. And remember, what the NFL draft is trying to make sure is that they get players that are going inside the top 20 or top 25 to be invited to the draft. And Matthew Golden's been one of the most requested receivers for these 30 visits. I think he's had like 16 or 17 visits already. And they range from top 5 picks all the way to the back end of round 1. There are just a lot of teams that could use this type of player, right? Somebody who is a Z receiver, but also spent time as an X, that can play in the slot, that's got really good speed. Now, he doesn't always play to that speed, but he's got really good speed. I think his ceiling is probably 11, 12, but I don't see him getting outside of like pick 21. So he's going to go fairly early. It's just whether or not he's the first receiver drafted, we'll see.
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made here. I mean, obviously, I would still have Tatton Burden a little bit higher than that, just based on their profiles. The lack of production with Golden scares me a little bit. The fact that he was a transfer, the drop rate. There's some things that I don't love, but I do love the film, and particularly from this year, when you go look at the targets, every target of Matthew Golden, it was impressive, and so definitely some things to like there. But I that's one of the things I'm most interested for on Thursday night is to see Thursday night of the draft. I should preface is to see what order these receivers go in. Like how many go in the first round? Are we talking about 3 receivers here? I think that 2 is a given. Like you're not going to get less than that in the first round. Does Luther Burden fall out of the first round? But Matthew Golden's positioning be particularly interesting to see where he goes, and maybe he'll end up in Dallas, and then you can have another receiver there.
I wouldn't be surprised. We see these receivers that run in the 4.2s. I mean, they go in the first round. Like Xavier Worthy was picked, was it 27 last year? 2022, we saw Chris Olave go, I think it was 11. Jamison Williams went 12th. Henry Ruggs in the 2020 draft was the first receiver off the board because he ran in the 4.2s. Like these guys that just have even a little bit of production and run really fast, they don't last very long. And I think in a draft that doesn't have top end wide receiver talent, and I think the depth in this class is a little overrated as well, teams are just going to want to get to the receiver early, so they're not having to worry about trying to find a guy on, round 2, round 3, round 4. I think Golden goes pretty early in the draft, and the only question is, Does he jump Tetero McMillan, who I know a few teams round pick 11, 12, 13 all leg? We'll see on Thursday night.
Yeah, we go live on this show. This was our first one, and so thanks for joining us here. We're going to be going live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time every Monday. So come and join us for some draft talk leading up to it, draft fallout after the draft. If you're listening on the audio side, stay with us for an exclusive interview with Minnesota edge rusher Ja Joyner, who's set to enter the NFL draft. And if you're watching on the video side, there will be a video. The video version of this will be available on YouTube right after the show. And thanks for watching.